I need a moment. Because this story didn't just hit, it lingered. The kind of story that sits with you long after you've closed the tab, while you are making coffee or staring out a window, and you think, yeah, I've seen this. Maybe I've lived this. This is a story about a woman who got a second chance, not to win him back, not to make him pay, and she did it so cleanly, so quietly, that by the end, the most devastating character in the whole story isn't the villain. It is the man who finally understood what he lost when it was far, far too late. Ivy Carter didn't come back from the dead to burn everything down. She came back to walk away, and somehow, that is so much more powerful. Miss Carter, we're very sorry, but the dress you reserved yesterday has already been taken by someone else. Miss Carter, Miss Carter, the sales assistant's cautious voice pulled me back from my daze. I slowly came to my senses and looked around. The boutique bridal shop had soft lighting, and every dress gleamed with a pearl-like luster under the lights, like dreams quietly waiting to be chosen. I took a deep breath, forcefully suppressing the shock and delight that was about to overflow from my heart, barely restraining the corners of my mouth from curving upward. It is fine. I have some things to take care of. I'll come back to choose in a couple of days. No one knew that I had been reborn. Reborn exactly 7 days before my wedding with Lucas Harvey. My name is Ivy Carter, 28 years old. I used to be the only female firefighter in this city's fire department. No, I have a titanium alloy prosthetic on my right forearm. And I'm supposed to marry Lucas Harvey, this city's hottest business elite, in 7 days. Or rather, I was supposed to marry him. My best friend, Jessica Moore, whom I dragged out of the bridal shop, followed behind me with a furrowed brow and a confused expression. Ivy, you're getting married in a week. If you don't pick out the wedding dress today, will you have enough time? The sunlight on the street was lovely, warming my face. I squinted my eyes. When Lucas comes to mind, I rarely conjure up his image: dark suit, sharp shoulder lines, brown eyes always carrying an inscrutable calmness. He is good Jan-looking, I'll admit that. But now when I recall him, my heart no longer stirs even the slightest bit. Like a cup of coffee that once burned your mouth, no, completely cold. I shrug, me tone casual. I don't want to marry him anymore. Jessica's eyes widen as she reaches out to feel my forehead. You don't have a fever. Who was it that followed Lucas around like a little tail for years, and now you're just not marrying him? I slap her hand away and look at her seriously. I figured it out, Jessica. Lucas is marrying me out of guilt, out of responsibility, not out of love. We're destined to have a bad ending, so I don't want to marry him anymore. Jessica opens her mouth, not knowing what to say for a moment. People come and go on the street, some pushing strollers, some holding hands and talking with laughter. Standing in this ordinary scene of everyday life, I feel something in my chest finally beginning to loosen. I didn't lie to Jessica in my past life. Lucas and I indeed both had bad endings. I liked Lucas for nearly 8 years, lived with him for nearly 2 years, and when he suddenly got down on one knee to propose one day, I agreed in the heat of the moment. Looking back now, there were so many things I hadn't thought through at all back then, and I just walked into that wedding hall in such a muddled way. After getting married, we did have a period of peaceful days until I discovered that the business partner Lucas had been hiding from me was his childhood sweetheart he grew up with, Chloe Winters. It is not like I hadn't heard about Lucas and Chloe's story. Everyone around said they were a match made in heaven, living on the same street since childhood, going to school together, growing up together. If it weren't for Chloe insisting on going to Europe for graduate school against her family's wishes, I probably wouldn't have had any chance to get close to Lucas. Everyone compared me with Chloe, saying I wasn't as pretty as Chloe, didn't have Chloe's prestigious family background, didn't have Chloe's outstanding abilities. At first, I really didn't care about all this. But as time went on, even the hardest heart gets worn down bit by bit. I started noticing that fleeting comparison in Lucas's eyes when he looked at me, and slowly lost my confidence and rationality through countless meaningless comparisons. I cried and made scenes with Lucas, threatening him to terminate his cooperation with Chloe. At first, he would still patiently explain, but later he would just silently slam the door and leave. I became that emotionally unstable woman, in Lucas's words. What was even harder to accept was what happened later. Our child grew up, and one day he sat across from me and calmly said to me, "Mom, you and Dad are no longer from the same world now. Why won't you let go? Everyone thinks Aunt Chloe is the real lady of the Harvey house. This isn't doing anyone any good if you keep going like this." Everyone called me emotional, called me too obsessed. But not a single person stopped to think about why I became this way. I knew there was no point in dragging it out any longer, but I wasn't willing to accept it. I wasn't willing to bet all my youth and love on one person, only to end up with not even a single echo in return. Even if I die, I want to die with the name Mrs. Harvey. Lucas was at a loss with me too. He stopped coming home, stopped talking to me, using silence and indifference to sever the last bit of connection between us. That Harvey family mansion became a cage I built for myself with my own hands. Just like that, we tormented each other for over 30 years, until the day of my 60th birthday. I scrolled past a photo on social media. Lucas, Chloe, and my son. The three of them standing together, smiling warmly, looking exactly like a happy family portrait. I put down my phone, lifted my head, and met my own eyes in the mirror. I don't know when, but I had aged into this. Clearly Lucas, Chloe, and I were the same age. They were radiant, while the me in the mirror had hollow eyes and deep wrinkles, like a tree drained of all moisture. In that moment, I suddenly felt that all those years of entanglement and obsession, all the effort and time I'd spent, it was really truly meaningless. Fortunately, heaven was willing to give me one more chance. I returned to 7 days before the wedding. I still have a chance to restart my own life. When I got back to the apartment, Lucas had already set out dinner. He was always like this, managing the details of life so neatly and thoughtfully that it was hard to find any fault. "Did you pick out the wedding dress?" He placed a piece of my favorite roasted chicken breast into my bowl, his movement natural, like a habit repeated countless times. Without looking up, I picked up my fork and pushed that piece of meat aside. "Haven't decided yet." I paused for a moment and looked up at him. Actually, something strange happened. That dress I liked last time was already reserved by someone yesterday. Lucas's fork paused for a moment. I caught this detail in my eyes, and he had already regained his usual composure. "It is good to change to another one," he said, his gaze casually sweeping over my right arm. "Sleeveless styles don't suit you. I want to start here because this moment is so quiet. And yet, it tells you everything about Lucas Harvey in a single sentence. He didn't yell. He didn't confess. He just redirected, casually. Like a man who has been managing inconvenient truths for so long that it has become second nature, he secretly reserved Ivy's wedding dress, the one she personally chose, the one she loved, and gave it to another woman. And when confronted, his justification wasn't even an apology. It was a dig. Sleeveless styles don't suit you. Translation: your disability is an inconvenience to my image, And I've already decided what you should wear to your own wedding. Here is what makes this moment so insidious. It is dressed up as consideration. He is not being cruel. He is being practical. He is protecting her from judgment. That is the story he tells himself. And it is the story he has been telling himself about every single act of favoritism toward Chloe. Always framed as logic, never acknowledged as preference. This is a very specific kind of emotional manipulation that women recognize immediately and men rarely see in themselves. The slow, steady reframing of your partner's legitimate feelings as overreaction, sensitivity, irrationality. Until you start to believe it too. The old Ivy did believe it for 30 years. But this Ivy, she clocked it in the pause of a fork. One beat of hesitation before he composed himself. That is all it took. Because when you've lived the ending, you stop being fooled by the opening act. The dress was never about the dress. It was about who he chose to protect and who he chose to manage. And Ivy finally stopped being manageable. It was the same in my last life. That beautiful sleeveless dress inexplicably disappeared before the wedding. At that time, I was immersed in the joy of getting married and didn't think much of it. Later, I found out that Lucas had quietly reserved that dress at double the price the day after I first tried it on. His excuse to himself was, "I don't want you to be talked about by others." I looked down at my right forearm. What was once a healthy arm is now replaced by a titanium alloy prosthetic, reflecting a calm metallic sheen under the light. I remember seeing a long den-sleeved one last time. The style was really nice too. Lucas acted as if the dress that was reserved had nothing to do with him. I was too lazy to beat around the bush and spoke directly. "I know you're the one who reserved it." I put down my fork and looked at him. "Is it for Chloe Winters?" Hearing Chloe's name, Lucas was obviously stunned for a moment. Well, he had always kept the fact that Chloe was his business partner tightly under wraps. Since I'd called him out on it, he stopped hiding it, but frowned with a hint of impatience in his tone. "Ivy, I know you have issues with the fact that Chloe and I are childhood friends, but we're just ordinary business partners now. We're about to get married. Can you please stop overthinking things? The company is organizing a group wedding celebration for several long-time employee couples next week, and Chloe liked that dress, so I just went ahead and reserved it for her." He paused for a moment, his tone softening a bit, as if making some kind of concession. "Besides, that sleeveless one doesn't suit you anyway, your prosthetic. Forget it." He didn't finish. But the meaning was already crystal clear. My expression gradually darkened. Lucas sighed, putting on a compromising attitude. "Fine, if you're really unhappy about it. We'll just have them return the dress after the event." "Lucas," I put my fork down heavily on the dining table, my voice calm, but each word clearly enunciated. "Do you think my prosthetic limb embarrasses you?" Lucas said with a cold face. "Isn't what I said the truth? It is just a dress, Ivy. Can you stop being so unreasonable?" "Fine, then what do you say we do? Should we just call off the wedding?" Only then did I belatedly realize that Lucas was forcing me to give in. It was the same in my past life. Whenever something involved Chloe, he would use my feelings for him to force me to back down again and again. And the old me, between changing the dress and cancelling the wedding, would always choose the former without hesitation, then swallow my grievances one mouthful at a time. But I don't want to marry him anymore, so I calmly nodded. "All right, then as you wish, let's cancel the wedding." Lucas clearly didn't expect me to say that. He froze in place for a good half-minute. Then instead of getting angry, he laughed, and something indescribable flashed through his eyes. "Ivy, those are your own words. Don't regret it." He got up, and the bedroom door slammed shut, shaking the entire apartment with the echo. I sat there, looking at the carefully arranged dinner in front of me, already having lost all appetite. I had long known that Lucas married me out of guilt, but when he actually used that tone to force me to compromise, I still felt a dull ache, like a ball of cotton stuck in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I closed my eyes, took a few deep breaths, and tried hard to ignore that uncomfortable feeling. 7 days. There were still 7 days left. I don't want to be like my previous life, wasting all my best years on meaningless entanglements of love and hate. When I woke up the next morning, Lucas had already left for the office early. On the dining table sat a small black gift box. Opening it, I found a pair of diamond earrings, carved in the shape of clouds, exquisitely crafted with a restrained luster. This was Lucas's usual tactic after every Cold War, using a pretty gift to substitute for a genuine apology. I ignored the gift box, pushed it aside, and started packing my things. Since I'd already decided to call off the engagement, there was no reason to continue living together. Lucas and I had lived together for nearly 2 years. My belongings weren't too many, but after picking and choosing, they still filled 3 large suitcases. I had just sent a text asking Jessica to help me find a short Jan-term rental apartment when I received a message from Lucas. He was asking me to deliver a contract document to his company. I didn't want to see his face, but I also didn't want to make things too ugly. So in the end, I still went. After living with Lucas for nearly 2 years, today was the first time in this lifetime I'd set foot in the Harvey Group building. The spacious lobby, towering glass curtain walls, the reception ladies wearing uniform dark tan-colored suits. Makeup exquisite, expressions professional. She eyed me suspiciously, her gaze lingering on my right arm for a second, before quickly moving away. As if caught doing something impolite, she didn't recognize me. So naturally, she didn't dare let me in easily. I could only bite the bullet and call Lucas's phone. The phone rang a few times on the other end before being actively hung up. Under the reception lady's faint gaze, he dialed Lucas's assistant's phone again. Only then did the receptionist receive notification, and with a professional smile told me, "Miss Carter, President Harvey is in the multifunction hall. Please go wait in his office first." I declined her offer to lead the way and took the elevator alone. Behind me, I vaguely heard the reception lady's lowered voice gossiping. "That is the real deal, right? President Harvey and Director Winters are at." It wasn't until I inexplicably walked to the entrance of the multifunction hall that I understood what they meant. The entire multifunction hall was decorated with flowers and white balloons, like an actual wedding scene. A red carpet extended from the entrance all the way to the front stage. Both sides filled with white roses, the lighting soft and warm, as if specially prepared for some sacred ceremony. Lucas and Chloe Winters stood in the center of the red carpet, fingers interlocked. They looked at each other, their eyes carrying a quiet, deep affection that no outsider could intrude upon. And that sleeveless dress I had personally chosen was now being worn by Chloe. The tiny crystals on the hem of the dress refracted blinding light under the stage lights, making my eyes ache. I blinked involuntarily. A tear slid down silently. I wondered if during all those years I knew nothing about. Lucas and Chloe had also stood together like this, declaring their feelings for each other, and I was just an unavoidable accident between them. "Lucas, just how many things have you lied to me about? I thought that after enduring all that torture in my previous life, all I had left for him was complete hate, but the scene before my eyes still made me feel terribly awful. My chest felt like something had torn it open, a dull pain spreading out, as if grieving for that self who had wasted an entire lifetime. Applause erupted from below the stage, and the host's voice came through clearly. "All right. Thank you, President Harvey and Director Winters, for walking us through tomorrow's event rehearsal process." On stage, Lucas walked down with his arm around Chloe's slender waist, the two of them talking quietly about something, their smiles natural and intimate, until Lucas looked up and his gaze happened to meet my eyes. The smile on his face froze in that moment. Right away, he quickly pushed through the crowd and walked up to me, looking somewhat flustered. That was just a rehearsal. Don't get the wrong idea. The kiss was just staged positioning. It wasn't real. He reached out his hand, wanting to wipe away the tear stains at the corner of my eye, but I turned my head away to avoid him. I cut him off. I know. My calmness left Lucas at a loss for how to respond. He stood there dumbfounded, as if he only knew how to handle me making a big fuss, but didn't know how to face this kind of silence. Then, Chloe came over. "Lucas, Lee is looking for you. Oh, and this is..." Chloe's voice was light and airy, her tone rising, as if she had just now noticed me, but the look in her eyes betrayed her. Her gaze swept from my face to my right arm, lingering on that prosthetic limb for a second. Then she nodded knowingly, a meaningful smile floating to the corner of her mouth. "This must be Miss Carter, right? Lucas mentions you often. Seeing you in person lives up to your reputation." As she spoke, she intimately draped herself over Lucas's shoulder, leaning close to his ear, but deliberately kept her voice loud enough for me to hear clearly. "You go ahead. I'll keep Miss Carter company." Lucas gently brushed away, Chloe's hand resting on his shoulder. It was just this simple movement that made Chloe's expression stiffen for a moment. He touched my hair, his tone softening a bit. "Let Chloe sit with you for a while first. I'll be right back." As Lucas left, the other people in the multipurpose hall also dispersed one after another, leaving only Chloe and me standing there. The smile on Chloe's face faded. She looked down at the dress she was wearing, her tone casual. "Miss Carter has such great taste. Everything she picks is so beautiful." I couldn't be bothered to respond to her probing. Chloe pushed her luck further, a hint of subtle contempt in her voice. "And it suits me so well. Don't blame Lucas, he just thought this dress looked better on me. As soon as I mentioned it, he ordered it for me." She paused, her tone carrying a carefully crafted pity. "But honestly, such a beautiful wedding dress, having someone who doesn't deserve it wear it, is really quite a shame." There was a hidden meaning in her words. Only then did I give her a proper look. "It really is quite a shame." I looked back at her calmly. "Once worn by someone unclean, the next person can't wear it anymore." Chloe's expression stiffened. She instinctively clenched her teeth, squeezing out a few words through them. "Don't get too cocky. Even if you marry him, you might not be able to win against me, so obsessed with something someone else doesn't want." I patted her shoulder meaningfully. "Then I'll give it to you. I don't care for it." I turned to leave, but at that moment, Chloe reached out and grabbed my prosthetic fingers. "Miss Carter," she deliberately raised her voice, and the few people nearby who hadn't dispersed yet turned their heads around one after another. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." Before I could react to what she was trying to do, I felt a violent pull and pain from the stump of my right arm. When I opened my eyes again, Chloe had already grabbed my prosthetic limb and thrown it onto the floor. The stump was exposed to everyone's sight. The murmurs around me pierced into my ears like needles. Is that the woman who is about to marry Harvey? Her arm. She is not using the fact that she saved him to force him to marry her. Is she? Once upon a time, I too felt that such a deficiency was shameful, something that couldn't be shown to others, something unworthy of standing beside Lucas. But living a second life, the love in my heart has long since dissipated. I only feel that the one who was never worthy of me has always been Lucas. Lucas quickly walked back, and when his gaze swept over the stump of my right arm, there was a trace of disgust that flashed through his eyes. That was a genuine emotion that couldn't be faked. In the end, he still found it repulsive, even though this deficiency came about because of him. Chloe had already sat up from the ground, still tightly gripping my prosthetic limb in her hand, her eyes slightly red, her voice tinged with grievance. "Miss Carter, I'm truly sorry. I didn't mean to knock off your prosthetic limb. I know you must feel terrible inside, but I really didn't mean to mock you. Please don't be angry." Lucas took the prosthetic from her hand and passed it to me, his tone low. "Ivy, Chloe didn't mean it. Don't blame her." He paused, his voice dropping even lower. "Put this on first. Here, it doesn't look good." They still thought I was that Ivy Carter who felt inferior because of her disability, who would break down from being seen. I just laughed once, calmly taking the prosthetic from Lucas's hand. "Lucas, you say it doesn't look good." I raised my head, looking straight into his eyes. "Don't forget, I lost this arm because of who. I had to leave the position I loved because of who. And my tone didn't waver in the slightest. I've never thought my prosthetic was shameful. This is the honor I earned with my life as a firefighter. This disabled person at least lives more honorably than you two." If Lucas hadn't brought it up himself, I hadn't actively thought about that fire in a long time. It was an ordinary late autumn evening. When the alarm sounded, my teammates and I had already arrived at the scene in the shortest time possible. The fire started from the ground floor of an old office building, thick smoke billowing, the flames spreading fast. The on-Dien site commander reported that there were still people inside who hadn't evacuated. I didn't think twice and rushed in with my teammates. The smoke was thicker than anticipated, visibility extremely low. I relied on my respirator and flashlight to search floor by floor until I found Lucas Harvey in a conference room on the 3rd floor. He was already showing obvious symptoms of oxygen deprivation. His consciousness was fuzzy, and he couldn't even stand steady. I had no time to think much, dragging him toward the exit. Just as we were about to reach the hallway exit, a dull cracking sound came from overhead. I instinctively pushed Lucas forward. Then the ceiling collapsed. When I woke up again, I was lying on a hospital bed, and everything below my right forearm was gone. Did it hurt? Of course it hurt. There is no way it couldn't hurt. But compared to the physical pain, what was even harder to bear was that enormous, overwhelming psychological gap. I was the only female frontline firefighter in the entire city's fire department. I had spent nearly 5 years going against my family's opposition, my colleagues' doubts, and society's prejudice to finally stand in that position. It wasn't just a job, it was something I had been certain of since childhood, something I was willing to pursue for my entire life. But after that fire, a distance that could never be crossed appeared between me and that dream, and that arm, which should have been my badge of honor, was later used by someone I once deeply loved as a knife to stab into my heart. Lucas didn't expect I would bring this up in front of so many people, and his face immediately darkened. I didn't stop. I looked pointedly at the dress Chloe was wearing. If I remember correctly, the one director Chloe is wearing is the one I just took a fancy to a couple days ago and was planning to wear at the wedding, right? Chloe probably didn't expect me to be so direct either. Her face flushed red, and she stepped back half a step, putting on the look of a wronged little white rabbit. Lucas spoke up first, his tone carrying suppressed anger. "Ivy, have you said enough?" When Chloe tore off my prosthetic in front of everyone, he didn't say a word. But when I just made a few sarcastic remarks, he came to lecture me about going too far. I always used to think Chloe lived a pretty twisted life. Now it seems Lucas is no better. He wanted to fulfill his responsibilities to me, while also unable to let go of his childhood bond with Chloe. Swaying back and forth between two women, yet still needing to find a high-Jan-sounding reason for each instance of favoritism. Lucas, the more you try to cover it up, the more I want everyone to know that you're the one who wronged me. I paused for a moment, then added in a calm tone, "And you're smarter than anyone. You should be able to see who deliberately called me over today." The surprise on Lucas's face the moment he saw me couldn't be faked. Think about it carefully, and you'd know who had the motive, the opportunity, and wanted to use this scene to humiliate me. Other than Chloe, who else could it be? Lucas turned his head slightly to glance at Chloe behind him, then shifted his gaze back to me, his tone low. "Ivy, calm down. I know Chloe. She is not that kind of person." He took a deep breath, his tone carrying a familiar, wary patience. "I know you've endured a lot over the years because of your arm, and I can understand your emotions, but you can't speculate about other people's motives like this in public. It is like talking to a brick wall. With their talent for twisting the truth, these two really are a match made in heaven." I backed away while clapping lightly, my tone as calm as if I were talking about something completely unrelated to me. "You two are quite the pair. I won't stick around here being an eyesore." I turned to leave, and only then did Lucas realize what he had just. He quickly stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. After a few seconds of silence, he relaxed his brow, his tone softening, as if struggling to squeeze out some kind of tenderness. "Ivy, I know you're upset. Let's go home, and I'll explain everything to you properly, okay?" "Lucas!" I didn't turn around. "Before you say that, you might want to look behind you first." He froze for a moment and turned around. Chloe was sitting on the ground, her eyes rimmed with red, worn hand quietly resting on her lower abdomen, her voice carrying a deliberately suppressed sob. "Lucas, you go keep Ivy company first. I'm fine. I can go to the hospital by myself." Lucas hesitated, his hand released from my wrist. "Ivy, there is no one with Chloe. I'm worried about her going to the hospital alone. You go home and wait for me first. I'll come back after taking her for a checkup." I didn't say anything, nor did I wait for him. I walked straight out of the multi-gen purpose hall, into the elevator, and out of the building. The sunlight outside was still lovely. People on the street still coming and going. No one knew what had just happened. 6 more days. I can't keep wasting time on this kind of person. Lucas didn't come back that night. Early the next morning, I went alone to the Harvey family estate. My engagement with Lucas had been decided by Diana Harvey. Now that I wanted to break off the engagement, I should explain it to her face to face. When I arrived at the estate, Diana was sitting in her study practicing calligraphy. This was her unwavering morning habit of many years, said to keep her mind sharp. I walked into the study with familiar ease, sat down beside her, and helped her grind the ink. I had done this motion for nearly 2 years. It was already as natural as muscle memory. After quite a while, Diana put down her brush, turned her head to look at me, and sighed. "Ivy, I heard about Chloe's situation." She paused, her tone steady, carrying that unique calmness of someone long dead seasoned in the business world. "If you find her an eyesore, I'll have the board find a suitable reason to remove her from her position at the company. But you also know that your arm was injured because of Lucas. If you propose to cancel the wedding now, I have no way to explain it to your father, and no way to explain it to the outside world. I looked at her calmly. Diana, I began, my tone steadier than I expected. When that fire happened, I was a firefighter on duty. No matter who was trapped inside, I would have gone in to save them. That was my responsibility, and it has nothing to do with who Lucas is. So strictly speaking, there is no direct causal relationship between me losing my arm and Lucas. I've just figured out one thing. I can't bet the rest of my life on a relationship I'm not sure about just because of an accident. I don't want to ruin myself. Diana looked at me in silence for a long time. Then she calmly shook her head. Marriage is a major life event, not a decision that can be made on impulse. Besides, the wedding invitations have already been sent out, and the media have all been notified. Cancelling at this point, no matter what the reason, the outside world will only say the Harvey family is acting in bad faith. Ivy, think it over again. She didn't refuse outright, but her meaning was already clear. She didn't agree. I silently followed behind her as we walked downstairs. A woman's soft laughter came from the living room. I looked up, and only then realized Lucas had come back at some point. In his arms, he was holding Chloe Winters. The moment Lucas saw me, his smile froze on his face. When Chloe saw Diana, she also quickly put away that flamboyant attitude she had in front of me, becoming meek and polite, like a different person. 4 people stood in the living room, none of them speaking first. Lucas was the first to break the silence. He carefully helped Chloe to sit down on the sofa, then straightened up, his expression somewhat awkward. Mum, Ivy, Chloe sprained her ankle and can't move around easily. I want to let her stay at the manor for a few days. We grew up together, and I don't feel comfortable with her being alone. Diana didn't answer immediately. She had fought her way through the business world for decades, and her eye for people had always been sharp. In her own words, she had always felt that Chloe had too many schemes hidden between her brows. And when she smiled, her eyes were cold. So even though Lucas and Chloe were childhood friends, Diana had never truly accepted this woman. Lucas knew he couldn't persuade his mother, so he turned his attention to me. Ivy, he said yesterday that I'd come home and explain to you. Can you not run to my mum to tattle on me every time? Diana's voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Tattle. What she told me was that you took her wedding dress and gave it to another woman to wear, that you embarrassed your fiancée in front of everyone at the company. Do you have any idea what it would mean for the Harvey Group's reputation if this thing got out? Mom! Lucas got a bit anxious. This is a misunderstanding. I'll explain it clearly to Ivy. This has nothing to do with Chloe. Diana ignored his explanation and continued speaking. I don't care what that woman's background is. All I know is that the things you've done for her are so stupid, I can't stand to watch. She paused, a trace of weariness in her tone. I'll tell you the truth. Ivy came today to tell me she doesn't want to get married anymore. No way. Lucas didn't even finish listening before he suddenly shot to his feet, his voice carrying a kind of panic he himself might not have even realized. At that very moment, I noticed Chloe. Lucas's sudden movement made her instinctively shrink back, and her hand, in that instant, gently covered her lower abdomen. It was just a brief, almost imperceptible gesture, but I connected it with all her abnormal behavior over the past few days. And suddenly, all the fragments came together into a complete picture. Chloe's repeated provocations toward me during this time, her repeated attempts to force me away, weren't just because Lucas's upcoming marriage gave her a sense of crisis. It was because she was pregnant. She needed to get Lucas to marry her as soon as possible. Diana pulled Lucas into the study Only Chloe and I were left in the living room. I turned to leave, but was stopped by Chloe's voice. "You really don't want to marry Lucas anymore?" I turned my head back. Chloe's face no longer had that disgusting arrogance from before, nor the carefully designed grievance. Her expression was unusually calm, like a pool of water without ripples. "You should have noticed too," she said calmly. "Deanna won't agree to you breaking off the engagement." She was right. Harvey Group's PR team had vigorously promoted this hero and rescued love story during the wedding preparation period, packaging it into a warm, inspirational brand narrative that fit Harvey Group's positive image. If they suddenly announced a cancellation on the eve of the wedding, no matter what the reason, public opinion would point at the Harvey family. Diana was a shrewd businesswoman. She would never allow such a thing to happen. Chloe lifted her eyes to look at me, her tone calm and direct. "I'll help you break off the engagement. The condition is, I want to marry Lucas." After leaving the Harvey estate, Deanna sent me a message. "Ivy, don't be impulsive. The Harvey family is your best support right now. Think it through before making a decision." The implication was a threat. I stared at this message for a few seconds, turned off the screen, and dialed my father's phone. On the first day after rebirth, I had already told my father, Martin Carter, and my brother Brandon Carter about not wanting to marry Lucas. My father fell silent on the other end of the phone, then let out a low chuckle. "That boy looks all polished on the outside, but deep down he is clueless. At his age, can't even make decisions about his own marriage. Marrying you would be you settling for less." My father, in his younger days navigating the business world, had always been direct in his speech, never beating around the bush. Actually, back when I insisted on becoming a firefighter, he was the first to oppose it. We had a huge fight over it, neither of us willing to back down. But when I truly lost my right forearm, he was the first person to rush to the hospital. It was him who stopped my brother Brandon from beating the completely unscathed Lucas outside the hospital room into serious injury. Later, Diana stepped in. Lucas agreed to live with me and promised to marry me, and only then did my father reluctantly relent, taking his bellyful of anger to recuperate out of town. During that time, my father's health wasn't good, and although my brother Brandon had drive, he was still exploring his entrepreneurial direction. The Carter family fell into a slump for a while. It was precisely because of this that Diana had the audacity to use lines like, "The Harvey family is your best support to suppress me." She probably just didn't know that my father's health had long since recovered, and he was preparing to return to the East Coast to settle down and retire. And my brother Brandon had been deeply invested in tech startups these past few years. His company had already completed several rounds of financing and was in a period of rapid growth. The Carter family never needed to rely on the Harvey family to prop up our reputation. I told my father about the deal Chloe proposed. There was 2 seconds of silence on the other end of the phone. Then came his usual hearty laughter. "Now that is a clever approach." He paused for a moment, his tone becoming serious. "Ivy, if you've thought it through, just do it. Dad and your brother have got your back. There is nothing to be afraid of. And," his voice lowered a bit, carrying a hint of natural authority, "that old lady Diana, daring to threaten my daughter with words, she'll get what is coming to her sooner or later." That night, I was leaning against the headboard reading a book when Lucas came home very late. He pushed open the bedroom door, took off his coat, said nothing, and just pulled me into his arms from behind. He had a scent of roses mixed with cedar on him. That was the perfume Chloe always used. I didn't move, just turned the page to the next one. Lucas buried his face in my hair, his voice somewhat low, carrying an urgency that was hard to define. "Are you seeing someone else? Why did you suddenly not want to marry me? Haven't you always?" He didn't finish the second half of the sentence, reaching out to pull the book from my hands. I directly knocked the spine of the book against his head. Not hard, but sobering. Lucas froze for a moment, then smiled bitterly as he rubbed his forehead. Ivy, who is the one seeing someone else? You know best yourself. Hearing this, something lit up in Lucas's eyes, as if he had grasped some answer he wanted. You're jealous, aren't you? He put his hand back on my shoulder, his tone becoming gentle, like coaxing a child. Chloe and I are just ordinary friends. I won't abandon you, Avie. Listen to me. After we get married, I'll be your right hand. I'll never let you bear everything alone. He said this same thing on the first day we lived together. When he said it back then, he gently cradled the wound on my tangi, his eyes showing genuine heartache and guilt. But now, when he says this, his gaze deliberately avoids my right arm. I didn't turn to look at him. Lucas, tell me the truth. Are you marrying me because of guilt or because of love? His hand stopped. After a few seconds of silence, he finally spoke. Of course, it is because of love. I closed my eyes. No, whether in this life or the last, you never loved me. You're marrying me because of guilt, because of responsibility, because you need someone who loves you wholeheartedly to fill the emptiness in your heart. Lucas, we were both wrong. That is why, in our last life, we ended up that way. I turned to my side, my back facing him. Let's sleep. We still have to check out the wedding venue tomorrow. I took the initiative to bring up the wedding, and Lucas was clearly relieved. He gently squeezed my shoulder, his voice carrying a hint of genuine comfort. All right, good night, Ivy. 4 days until the wedding. In the remaining 4 days, I finalized all the wedding details by myself. Floral arrangements, venue decoration, wedding ceremony, flow, guest seating, catering arrangements. I handled each item personally, confirming every detail repeatedly. It is just that these details weren't being prepared for myself. Whenever Lucas wanted to get involved, Chloe would, as if afraid I'd back out, always find various reasons to call him away at the most opportune moments. Again and again, over and over. I said nothing, and Lucas instead grew more and more guilty. The gifts he placed in my hands grew more numerous, known after another, carefully selected and beautifully wrapped. I put them all in the deepest part of my closet, not opening a single one. When the wedding plan was delivered to Lucas, he just casually flipped through a few pages, then pushed the documents aside and looked up at me with a smile. Ivy, I trust your taste. I'm at ease leaving the wedding to you. He didn't even ask a single question. I told him that my father and brother might not make it to the wedding because something came up at the last minute. Lucas nodded, his tone relaxed. It is fine. After the wedding, we'll find time to make a special visit to your father and Brandon. There won't be that opportunity the last day. On the wedding day, the weather was beautiful. Just past CAM. The makeup artists were already in place. I sat in front of the vanity, letting them dress me up into an exquisite bride that met everyone's expectations. Before leaving, Lucas leaned down and gently planted a kiss on my forehead, his voice carrying a rare tenderness. After today, I'll be calling you Mrs. Harvey. That day will never come. The wedding car drove smoothly along the wide road. I gazed at the street scenery flashing past the window, silent for a long time, then took out a small pair of scissors from my purse. I lowered my head and cut snip by snip through the carefully sewn lace fabric on the dress sleeves. The sleeve was torn, and my residual limb and prosthetic were exposed to the air just like that. Lucas had always felt this prosthetic was something that needed to be concealed, an existence that embarrassed him, a defect that needed to be covered up with long, dan-sleeved dress. But he never once thought that this was a medal I earned with my life. I don't need to hide it, much less feel ashamed of it. The wedding car stopped outside the chapel. I took a deep breath and pushed open the car door. Chloe was already waiting there. She wore a simple white dress, her expression calm, something complex in her eyes. Unclear whether it was nervousness or relief. I walked up to her, stopped, and looked at her. Then, I gently removed the veil from my head and placed it on hers. "I wish you happiness." I paused for a moment, silently completing the second half of the sentence in my heart. "And I wish myself finally free." I turned around and saw Jessica standing not far away, waving at me desperately, her eyes narrowed from smiling so widely. I lifted my skirt and ran towards her. What Chloe told me that day was this: she was pregnant. The doctor told her that due to her own physical condition, this would very likely be her only chance to successfully conceive. She needed to marry Lucas and give this child a complete family. At the same time, the Winters family's financial chain had serious problems. If she couldn't marry into the Harvey family soon, the family was already arranging for her to marry a business figure, over 50 years old, as his second wife. And coincidentally, I didn't want to marry Lucas, but had no choice but to walk into the wedding hall due to Diana's forceful interference. So, we made a deal. I pretended to have a change of heart, but secretly arranged all the wedding details according to Chloe's preferences. Chloe was responsible for drawing Lucas's attention away from me again and again, so he had no time to notice those subtle traces in the wedding planning that belonged exclusively to Chloe. Finally, at the entrance to the hall, we switched places. Diana's refusal to cancel the wedding was simply for the Harvey Group's public image. But as long as Chloe publicly announced her pregnancy in front of the guests and media, Diana would have no choice. She would either accept this outcome or let the whole thing spiral completely out of control and turn into an even bigger scandal. With Diana's shrewdness, she would only choose the former. Everything would fall into place naturally. The second week after I settled down with my father on the East Coast, Jessica called. "Ivy, Lucas came looking for me." There was a hint of schadenfreude in her tone that she couldn't suppress. "He is so annoying," I told him. "I don't know where you went, but he still comes to block my door every day. The guy who promised to marry you turned around and got all cozy with Chloe. And now he is here playing the devoted lover. It is really disgusting." I leaned back in my chair, listening to Jessica talk about what happened after the wedding that day. Harvey Group's PR team had contacted many media outlets in advance, ready to cover this hero and rescued romantic wedding. Diana had arranged everything flawlessly, but the one thing she didn't account for was that the bride would be switched at the last moment. The moment the veil was lifted, the guests and media below fell into a brief silence. Standing on the red carpet was not Ivy Carter, the firefighter who had lost her right forearm, but an unfamiliar face. Then, Chloe publicly announced that she was pregnant. The venue instantly exploded. Flashlights lit up densely. Reporters began shooting frantically. Guests whispered among themselves, and the entire chapel turned into complete chaos. Lucas stood frozen for a good few seconds, then turned to leave immediately. Diana stopped him. No one heard clearly what she said. They only saw her raise her hand and give Lucas a crisp slap across the face. Then she signaled to the two staff members behind her to forcibly help Lucas stand back in his original position and complete the wedding. "I am sorry," Diana made him finish the wedding. After the veil came up, and it wasn't Ivy. After Chloe announced the pregnancy in front of every camera and journalist in the room, after the intimate photos of Lucas and Chloe started looping on the big screen. Courtesy of Brandon, who I would like to personally thank. Diana Harvey looked at the chaos her son created, slapped him across the face, and said, "You started this. You are going to stand there and finish it." And honestly good, because Diana spent the entire story trying to use Ivy as a reputational shield. Packaging this hero and rescued love story for Harvey Group's brand, threatening Ivy with the Harvey family, is your best support. Refusing to cancel the wedding because of optics. She treated Ivy's life like a PR asset. But here is the thing about people who play power games. They don't get to control the ending. Ivy didn't blow up the wedding out of spite. She engineered a graceful exit that also happened to be the most perfectly timed corporate implosion in recent memory. She handed Chloe exactly what Chloe said she wanted. Lucas, the wedding, the Harvey name, and walked away clean. The slap Diana gave Lucas wasn't maternal fury. It was a businesswoman watching her carefully constructed narrative detonate in real time, and taking it out on the architect of the disaster, which was, to be fair, entirely his fault. Every single person in that chapel got exactly what they'd been maneuvering for. Diana got her wedding, Chloe got her husband, Lucas got his consequences, and the big screen Bliss Brandon made sure the whole city got the receipts. Ivy got her freedom, and somehow, she is the only one who came out ahead. By the time Jessica got to this part, she was laughing so hard she couldn't speak. Wait, that is not even the best part. She took a deep breath and continued. I don't know who did it, but on the big screen at the wedding venue, they looped a set of intimate photos of Lucas and Chloe. You know, the ones from the office, with timestamps clear as day. Chloe immediately tried to smash the screen, but was stopped by the staff that scene. Jessica burst out laughing again. That scene, oh my God, there were at least a dozen cameras recording the whole thing, and by the next morning it was on the front page of several news websites. I hung up the phone, placed it on my knee, and looked up at my father sitting across from me reading the newspaper. Father unhurriedly turned a page without even lifting his head. Why are you looking at me? The big screen idea was your brother's own doing. He just can't stand people bullying you when we're not around. He paused for a moment, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. If you have a problem with it, go complain to him. I looked at my father's completely nonchalant manner, fell silent for 2 seconds, then laughed out loud. Outside the window, sunlight spread across the lawn in the courtyard, warm and cozy, as if it had softened the entire world. I took a deep breath of the grass, then scented air, feeling that thing that had been weighing down my chest for too long finally loosen completely. After resting for nearly 3 months, I followed my father's advice and decided to go abroad for further study. The direction I chose was emergency medical rescue management, a field that intersected with my past experience as a firefighter, yet opened a completely new door. When my father took me to the airport, he was unusually silent for a long time, until the boarding gate announcement sounded. Then he finally spoke. Ivy, he paused, his voice lower than usual. Take care of yourself over there. Just those 5 words. But I knew what he wanted to say was far more than that. Language learning has never been an easy thing, especially in a completely new environment. Adapting to everything from scratch. The courses were intensive, the pressure was considerable, sometimes studying late into the night, lifting my head to see the pitch-dim black sky outside the window. I'd feel a brief disoriented sense of not knowing what day or year it was. But whenever this feeling welled up, I only needed to look down at my right arm, at that titanium alloy prosthetic limb with its calm luster under the light, and I'd come back to clarity. Every bit of effort I put in was for myself, not for anyone else. The effort was worth it in the end. That afternoon, I sat by the dorm window, looking at the acceptance letter in my hand, with my name printed on it. Ivy Carter. I saw my own reflection in the glass window. Short hair, lean, something in my eyes that was different from before. Calm, but with light. I remembered my 60th birthday in my last life. The person I saw in the mirror. That woman with hollow eyes, drained of all vitality by the years. And then I look at myself now. This is good. It is not like Lucas didn't try to come see me. He found out through some channel that I was keeping my father company, and came knocking on the door over and over again. Father had people escort him out. Every time. I say escort. But it wasn't exactly polite. Once I happened to be upstairs, and through the window I saw Lucas being carried out of the courtyard by two people. His suit smudged with dirt, his hair all messed up, stumbling and landing hard on the steps outside the gate. He sat there, looking up at the upper floor. Our eyes met through the glass. His mouth moved, as if he wanted to say something. I drew the curtains and turned away. There was nothing left to say between him and me. After that, he came around less and less. According to my father's friend, Harvey Group's stock price had been falling all the way since the wedding fiasco. The board was in turmoil, and several major shareholders jointly demanded that Lucas provide an explanation and a restructuring plan. At the same time, the relationship between Chloe and Diana was tense from the start. The two had small fights every 3 days and big fights every 5 days at home. Yet they were oddly united in expressing their dissatisfaction with Lucas constantly running out, plagued by internal troubles and external threats. Lucas was overwhelmed. He switched from coming to the door to sending text messages. Message after message over and over again with the same words, reading like someone murmuring to the air alone in the middle of the night. No logic, no point. Just I'm sorry, and I want to see you appearing again and again. I looked at a few of them, found them boring, and set his number to do not disturb. Later, during my advanced studies, through my father's connections, I got engaged to the son of one of my father's old friends. My father's description was simple. He is a good guy, his family has some means, and most importantly, he likes you. Before we officially met, he had already generously transferred a considerable portion of his assets to my name, saying it was to put your mind at ease. My father said with a laugh over the phone, "When it comes to marriage, you've got to have either the person or the money. This one has both, so what are you worried about?" I never expected to meet someone like this in a foreign land. He didn't talk much, but every time he spoke it carried weight, and when he smiled, fine lines would appear at the corners of his eyes, making people feel grounded. He never deliberately avoided my prosthetic limb. The first time we met, he naturally held my left hand, and later, when we got familiar, he would seriously study the structure of that titanium alloy prosthesis, asking me if it was easy to use and if there was anything that needed adjusting. It was a feeling I had never experienced before, relaxed, on the eve of the wedding, after finishing dinner with him at a restaurant. I ran into Lucas at the entrance. He stood alone by the street, wearing a dark brown wool coat I recognized. It was a birthday gift I'd given him years ago, and he still kept it. He looked much thinner, his face haggard, with deep shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't had a good night's sleep in a long time. The person beside me noticed where I was looking and asked me quietly, "X?" His tone was calm, without jealousy, just confirming a fact. "Want me to go talk to him?" "No need." I shook my head. Some things should be said clearly face to face. He nodded, stepped back 2 paces. and stood quietly to the side waiting for me. I walked toward Lucas. Only when I got closer could I see clearly that his eyes were slightly red. Seeing me approach, his lips moved, but it was as if he didn't know where to start. After a few seconds of silence, he finally spoke, his voice a bit hoarse. "That person just now was." I didn't answer. Lucas lowered his eyes and continued talking to himself, as if he'd been holding it in for a long time and had finally found an outlet. "Ivy, I know you hate me. Everything that has happened these years is my fault. But there is one thing I didn't lie to you about. I married you because I really did love you. At first, I admit, I didn't like this arranged relationship. I thought you saved me out of duty, not because you liked me. Why should I be responsible for a lifetime because of that? But later, one time, I accidentally caught the way you looked at me." He paused, his voice dropping lower. It was then that I realized my heart was beating so hard. About Chloe and me, I know I was wrong. I unconsciously favored her because we grew up together. I couldn't be completely indifferent to her, but I never thought about abandoning you. Her pregnancy. That one time, I drank too much. I raised my hand, cutting him off. "Lucas," my tone was calm, so calm it surprised even myself. "Save those words for yourself. You don't need to say them to me." He looked up at me. "You say you love me," I continued, "but every time you see my prosthetic limb, there is disgust in your eyes. You say you won't favor Chloe, but every single time, you're the first to take her side. You say you put me first, but every time you need to make a choice, you never choose me. Lucas, wake up. You married me because of guilt and responsibility, not because of love. What you're saying now is just you convincing yourself to believe a better Jan-sounding version." I paused, then said finally, "There is one more thing I want you to know. That fire, no matter who was trapped inside, I would have gone in to save them. That is my duty. My losing my arm has no causal relationship with you. I don't hate you, Lucas. I've just finally figured it out. I hope you can figure it out too." After I finished speaking, I turned and walked back to the person waiting for me. He didn't ask me what I said, just naturally extended his hand. I held his hand. We walked side by side into the night, the streetlights behind us stretching our two shadows long. I didn't look back. I found out about Lucas's accident in the second year after my daughter was born. During that time, I was busy adapting to the new life of being a first-gen-time mother. When Father quietly placed that news in front of me on an ordinary afternoon, after I finished reading, I was silent for a long time, then placed the phone screen face down on the table. The details of what happened were pieced together bit by bit from different channels later on. After Chloe married into the Harvey family, her days didn't turn out as she had expected. After the wedding fiasco, the Harvey group fell into a difficult period, and external pressure put the entire family in a state of high tension. Diana never accepted Chloe from the start. The relationship between mother Jan-in-Jan-law and daughter Jan-in-Jan-law remained strained, and the atmosphere at home almost never truly relaxed. And Lucas, he copied that same set of coldness and distance he had used on me in his previous life intact onto Chloe. He started frequently staying out overnight, and later simply got himself another apartment outside, staying with a woman whose personality was completely different from Chloe's. Chloe went to confront them, and the two of them got into a fierce conflict. In the chaos, their child fell off the sofa, and by the time they got to the hospital, he had already stopped breathing. That was Chloe's only child. She completely broke down. What happened afterwards? The police report was written very briefly. Chloe, using a family gathering as an excuse, invited Lucas, Diana, and Lucas's girlfriend to Harvey Manor. and drugged their drinks with a large amount of sedatives. After everyone lost consciousness, she set the entire manor on fire. Then she sat on the steps at the manor's entrance, waiting for the fire to spread. By the time the fire department arrived, more than half of the manor had already burned down. Chloe was immediately detained and sent to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. When Lucas and Diana were rescued, they had already suffered severe injuries. After a long period of treatment, Lucas ultimately didn't make it. That manor, where I once ground ink, drank tea, and accompanied Diana in practicing calligraphy, where I once thought I would spend the long latter half of my life. Now, it had turned into ruins. I sat by the window, listening to my daughter's babbling sounds from the next room, with a very complicated feeling in my heart, not vindication, nor sorrow, and definitely not relief. Just a very deep, very heavy, indescribable sense of bewilderment. Many things, if someone had been willing to wake up a little earlier back then, perhaps it wouldn't have come to this. But life has no ifs. I lowered my head and looked at my daughter, who had just fallen asleep She was sleeping deeply, her little face flushed, breathing evenly and steadily. I gently placed her back in the crib and tucked in the corners of her blanket. The sky outside the window gradually darkened. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, followed by a knock on the door. "Ivy." It was his voice, steady as always. "Time to eat." "Coming," I responded, gently placed a kiss on my daughter's forehead, and stood up. Many years after that, I would occasionally recall this past, not because of regret, nor because of longing, but sometimes in an ordinary moment. Those memories would drift into my mind like a thin leaf, quietly, and then quietly drift away. I completed my advanced studies, earned a degree in emergency medical rescue management, and later joined a non-profit organization that specialized in providing psychological support and occupational rehabilitation services to frontline rescue workers. The first time I walked into that office, I saw a row of photos hanging on the wall, all of rescue workers who had been injured during missions and later found their direction again. I stood in front of that row of photos for a long time. Later, I hung my own photo up there too. The prosthetic limb was clearly visible in the frame, neither deliberately concealed nor deliberately emphasized, just existing there openly, just like it was supposed to exist. After my daughter grew up, she once asked me what happened to my right arm. I told her about that experience, without omissions or embellishments. After listening, she was silent for a while, then said earnestly, "Mom, you're so brave." I stroked her hair and smiled. "Not brave," I said. "That was my job. I did what I was supposed to do." She thought about it, then said, "Then Mum was also very brave for leaving that marriage afterward." I froze for a moment, then laughed out loud. "Yeah, that did require a bit of bravery." My husband sat at the other end of the sofa, pretending to focus on his book, but the corners of his mouth couldn't help turning up. Our daughter climbed over to his side and started doodling on his prosthetic limb. Oh no, on his arm, and he wasn't bothered, letting her do as she pleased. I leaned back against the sofa, looking at these two people. Outside the window, the setting sun dyed the entire living room a warm orange, like a painting, still, complete, lacking nothing. The events of my past life seemed like a very long dream. After waking up, the details were blurry, leaving only a vague outline. And this life is what I truly wanted. No entanglements, no depletion, none of that love and hate that hollows a person out bit by bit. Only this home, this person, this child, and this quiet dusk outside the window that belongs to me. There are no better days than now. The moment Chloe lifted her veil, I froze in place. It wasn't Ivy. Standing in front of me was not Ivy. I remember very clearly, in that instant, something inside me snapped, making a dull sound that even I didn't hear. I didn't understand why I felt so upset. It wasn't until many years later that I finally admitted that at some moment I hadn't noticed. I had truly fallen in love with her. Lucas's epilogue is the part of this story that I keep turning over in my mind, because it would be so easy and so satisfying to write him off as simply a villain, a selfish, weak man who strung two women along and got what he deserved. And he did get what he deserved. That part isn't in question, but this final section does something much more uncomfortable. It makes him human. He loved her. Not in time, not in the right way, not without a catastrophic amount of collateral damage, but genuinely, eventually, irreversibly. The sunlight on her profile, the heartbeat that skipped, the moment at the wedding when the veil lifted, and the only thought in his head was, "Where is Ivy?" And the most gutting line in the entire story. She had really left. It wasn't about being stubborn, wasn't waiting for my apology, wasn't waiting for me to chase after her. He finally understood. She didn't leave to make a point. She didn't leave to punish him. She left because she was done. Because she had already grieved the relationship in a previous lifetime and had nothing left to prove. That is the thing about people who have genuinely healed. They don't need the dramatic confrontation. They don't need you to finally see it. They've already moved on to the next chapter, and you are still stuck on the page they closed. Lucas spent years waiting for Ivy to come back and fight for them. What he couldn't comprehend was that the woman who came back from rebirth had already lived the entire story. She already knew the ending. She just chose to write a different one, and he was too late to be in it. The beginning of it all started with that fire. That day, I was trapped in that building, my consciousness fading, thinking that would be my end. She was the one who dragged me out. She pushed me out, and then the ceiling collapsed, pinning her down. When I was waiting for news in the hospital corridor, my mind was blank. I only remember when the nurse pushed the gurney past. I saw her right arm. My mum made the decision for me. I walked into the hospital room and saw her lying there, pale Jan-faced, eyes closed. That girl who used to follow behind me with a carefree smile was crying for the first time so ugly, so heart-wrenchingly. In that moment, my heart softened. I told myself, this is responsibility. This is what I should do. But I didn't realize that, in that moment, what drove me into the hospital room wasn't just responsibility. Later, we moved in together. I gradually got used to having her around, used to the smell of her grinding coffee, used to her always putting the remote under the third cushion on the left side of the sofa, used to her pulling all the curtains tightly shut before bed. I told myself, this is just habit, the dependence that comes from living together, not love, until one day, I turned around unintentionally and saw her sitting by the window reading. Sunlight fell on her profile, and she unconsciously turned a page. My heartbeat suddenly skipped. I stood there in place, stunned for a long time, before I finally pushed that thought down. I didn't dare admit it, because at that time, Chloe had just come back from Europe. She stood in front of me, carrying that familiar scent that had been etched in my memory since childhood. And I thought that was my deeper feeling, more rooted in the past. I swayed between the two of them, telling myself I could manage both sides, telling myself I hadn't wronged anyone, but I wronged Ivy, wronged her thoroughly. On the wedding day, after the veil was lifted, I froze on stage. Flashes from below the stage came at me one after another. I stood in that light, but there was only one thing on my mind. Where was Ivy? Where did she go? Later, I searched for a long time, asked Jessica, asked Brandon, asked everyone we mutually knew. No one told me where she was. Finally learned through roundabout ways that she was keeping her father company. I went to the door, got pushed out again and again. Once I fell on the steps, lifted my head, and saw the second den floor curtain move. I knew it was her. I thought she would come down. The curtain closed again, as if it had never moved. That moment I truly understood. She had completely let go. It wasn't about being stubborn, wasn't waiting for my apology, wasn't waiting for me to chase after her. She had really left. What happened after? I don't want to go into detail. Company matters, family matters, Chloe's matters, zone piled on top of another, pressing down on me until I couldn't breathe. I'm starting to understand that during those days when Ivy was around, my life had never actually been this chaotic. Not because she helped me manage anything, but because when she was there was a place inside me that was at peace. I lost that place, but only realized its weight after losing it. That final night, I was tied to a chair, watching the flames start spreading from the edge of the curtains, climbing upward bit by bit. Thick smoke quickly surged in, and I started coughing, my eyes stinging so badly I couldn't keep them open. I remembered that fire. I remembered her figure dragging me toward the exit, remembered that dull snapping sound, remembered that instant when she pushed me out. She must have been like this back then too, choked by the thick smoke, scorched by the intense heat, yet still pushed me out. I didn't know anything back then, didn't feel any of it. Now I know, but now there won't be another Ivy Carter coming to save me. This time, no one's coming. I deserve this. There are no better days than now. That line, that quiet, devastating, hard, one line. Here is what this story is really about. Underneath the rebirth premise and the wedding switcheroo, and the very satisfying big screen photo reveal, what it costs a woman to finally stop waiting to be chosen. Ivy didn't come back with a revenge plan. She came back with clarity. And clarity, it turns out, is so much more powerful than any scheme, because it can't be argued with, manipulated, or worn down over time. You can't gaslight someone who already knows the ending. What broke my heart, and I mean that genuinely, was the 30 years she described in her past life. Not the dramatic moments, the slow ones, the way she became that emotionally unstable woman. The way her own son sat across from her and told her she was the problem. The way she looked in the mirror at 60 and saw someone hollowed out, while Lucas and Chloe were still radiant. That is not a love story gone wrong. That is what happens when a woman spends decades pouring herself into a relationship that was never going to pour back. When she mistakes guilt for love, and endurance for devotion, and staying for strength. The cruelest part of Lucas's story isn't that he didn't love her. It is that he did, eventually, genuinely, and still managed to destroy her in the process. Because love without self-awareness is just another way to hurt someone, while believing you are a good person. And Chloe, I know she is the antagonist here, but her ending is the one that haunts me most. She fought so hard to get exactly what she wanted, Lucas, the Harvey name, the position, and then watched it become the thing that broke her, because she was so focused on winning Ivy's life that she never stopped to ask whether it was a life worth winning. Ivy walked away from a burning building twice. The first time, she lost her arm. The second time, she saved her soul. And the man she eventually found, the one who studied the structure of her prosthetic with genuine curiosity, who stepped back 2 paces and waited quietly while she handled her past, That detail destroyed me in the best way, because that is what it looks like when someone actually sees you, not the version of you that is convenient or inspiring or guilt-inducing. Just you exactly as you are, prosthetic and all. That is what Ivy deserved from the beginning, and she finally let herself have it. So here is what I want from you in the comments, when Ivy said, "I lost this arm because of who?" and then immediately followed it with that fire. No matter who was trapped inside, I would have gone in to save them. It has no causal relationship with, "You did that land for you the way it landed for me." Because I think that is the most quietly radical thing she says in the. She refused to let her sacrifice become a debt he owed her. She refused to let her wound become the chain that kept her tied to him. She gave back the guilt that he'd been using, consciously or not, as the foundation of their entire relationship. Have you ever had to give someone back their guilt to finally set yourself free? And the harder question, have you ever been the Lucas in someone's story? The one who told themselves they were doing right by someone, while quietly, consistently choosing someone else. No judgment. This channel exists precisely because these are the stories we don't say out loud. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.